Hi guys, I wanted to share some of my favorite Roswell videos. It's been about 75 years now, and I'm amazed that there's been no formal disclosure as yet. When the incident first happened, Walter Haut was the public information officer at the base who originally reported that the military has in their possession a flying saucer. He did recant his story shortly afterwards, and he kept the secret his entire life, but he left an affidavit to be opened upon his death. In the affidavit of Walter Haut, he describes the crash site, the UFO in bodies seen under a tarp, and he goes into detail about it, and then he says, I am convinced that what I personally observed was some type of craft and its crew from outer space. And then at the end, he says, this statement is to remain sealed and secured until the time of my death, at which time my surviving family will determine its disposition. Gerald Anderson was a boy when the crash happened. I think he was about 6 or 7 years old. He and his family had just moved to New Mexico, and they were out in the mountains looking for agate stone. He gives a good description of what he saw when they came to the crash site.
We approached the creature, drew back like this, like it was in fear of us, like we were going to hurt it. And it wasn't very long, trying to communicate with it. The adults were. It seemed to calm down and just sat there and kind of looked back and forth, watching them, apparently trying to figure out what was going on. Like,
what did it look like a little bit more?
These creatures, all of them were about 4 foot tall, 4.5 feet tall. They had very large heads that were shaped larger on the top when they kind of tapered down. Not to a real sharp point, but just tapered down where they were thin. And they had very large, oval-shaped or almond-shaped, I guess you could say, black eyes they were so shiny they had almost a bluish tint to them when the light reflected off of them. Their skin coloration, I think the best way I could describe that is kind of a bluish tinted milky white. It looked like someone in shock.
Shortly after the incident, Glenn Dennis was a mortician at a local funeral home. He received a call from the Air Force inquiring what are the smallest caskets you have available, and they also inquired what would be the preparation for bodies that had been left out in the elements.
Okay, the way I became involved in this was started out in the early afternoon, around probably 1:30 in the afternoon. And I received a telephone call from the mortuary officer out at the Walker Air Force Base, Army Airfield Base. And he was inquiring about what would be the smallest possible casket that we could get that would be hermetically sealed. And at that time, I know that we had used like the 4 feet and caskets. We had used those before, but I thought they also made them in a 3/6. So, he wanted to know if we had any in stock, and I said no. But if I can make a call to Amarillo, I can have them in, by 7 o'clock the next morning on a truck. So he said, I'll get back to you, and that was the first contact that I had with the base.
And then what?
Then he called back, probably 45 minutes or so later. And he said, I need to ask you some more questions. He said, in case something like this should happen, he said, we need to know what the preparation, what your preparations are for the bodies that had been laying out in the elements, And he said, we need to know also what if your treatments of the bodies are the remains, what could you do to them, and if your treatments, would it change any of the chemical breakdown of the tissues, the blood? Would it make a difference?
Frankie Rowe was the daughter of a firefighter who was called out to the Roswell scene. She describes what it was like when her father came home from work that day. He was so excited and couldn't wait to tell them all about it.
The very first time that I heard about this at all. Okay. Daddy came home from work, and he got home that evening, and he came in so excited, and I was in the kitchen with Mother, and he asked Mother, he said, I've got something I want to tell everybody. Get everybody in here. And she said, we're cooking supper right now. And he said, well, how long is it going to be? Because I've got to talk to everybody. And it was just my mother and myself and the 3 younger kids at home, and my other sister was working. So we hurried and we got it on the table and called the kids in. And he started telling us that they had gone on a call of what they thought was going to be a plane crash north of Roswell. And he said they got called out to Blackwater Draw. And when they got out there, what they saw was not a plane that was our plane, but he said it was a flying craft from somewhere else. Well, we didn't ask questions, but Mother asked all the questions, and we were just listening, and she started, what do you mean somewhere else? And he said, it's not an airplane. He said, it's not from this world.
Sergeant Homer Rowlett Jr. was part of the cleanup crew for the Roswell crash. He kept the secret his entire life, but he had gotten sick when he was older, and on his deathbed, he told his daughter the truth.
My father was in the Air Force, and he was stationed here at Roswell at the time in 47. He was assigned as part of the cleanup crew out at the site. He had the highest security clearance that the Air Force gives. And as he was laying on the gurney waiting to be loaded into the ambulance, he told me, he said, baby, he said, the story is true. He said, don't let anybody try to tell you any different. He said, the incident happened. There was a spacecraft. He said there were graves out there. And I kissed him, and that's the last I got to talk to my dad.
There's a lot more proof out there than this, but these are some of the people that I found to be most credible and interesting. I'd love to hear your comments, and thanks for watching.